today I am building in Windenburg, and you will see that I already have my shell set up. It was because I was really just playing around with the balance of the build because I wanted it to be lopsided. I just didn't know where I wanted each of the levels to be, and so I was just putting rectangles around to see what it would look like, and I was actually really happy with my first attempt at it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to just redo this for the video. It's fine. It's just a shell. It doesn't really matter. I just laid out some rectangles, like I said before, and then I have them like hanging off of the piece that is below it to just give it that like lopsided, like unique look to it that's like a little bit whimsical, especially with like the shapes of the roof and stuff. I actually did a build very similar to the sort of idea a while ago, and I never actually finished it or posted it. And so when I was doing this, I was like, wow, this is my chance to do the build that I started like probably a year ago and I never actually got around to doing anything with. And I really like how this one turned out. I really like the different chimneys that I had added in, and I realized that the chimney that is on the second level of this build, the smoke kind of goes up into that top room at the top of the build. I don't know why I had to specify that, but it goes up there, and that's the cauldron room. And so it looks like there's like smoke just in that room, which I felt like made sense. It maybe wouldn't have made sense if that was any other room, so it was good that I just made that the cauldron room by default. And then the room under that room is a very tiny bedroom. The main areas of the house, which is like the kitchen, dining room, living room, is on like the second floor of this build. And then the bottom level, I didn't really know what I wanted that level to be at all until sort of like the end of it. I left it for last because I didn't know. At first, it was going to be like a stable. I was like, wow, I can have like a horse stable down there. And then it turned into me wanting it to maybe be like a workspace. And then it ended up turning into like a little bar area down there. So like there is one little area that's like the workspace where there's like a flower arranging table and stuff. And then towards the back of that is a cute little magical bar and a bathroom down there. I figured I'd have more fun decorating something like that than just making it an entire like workstation area where it's like gardening supplies and stuff. And it definitely was a lot more fun to do it that way, but you'll see that way later in the video. That's one of the last things I do. But right now I am picking out the like roof textures for this build. You'll see that I already picked out all of the wallpapers and stuff. I was going with some of my old favorites that I used to use all the time. This build feels very me. And like I at one point I was felt like I was getting repetitive with all the things that I was using. So I feel like I haven't really like used these sorts of swatches and stuff in a while, and it felt good using all of this. I was really happy with how this build came out, and it made me feel more confident again in my building after taking a little bit of a break and going through like a building slump and not really knowing what I'm doing or what I want to build and stuff. And this felt very easy. And so it felt really good to build something like this again. And I caught myself off about something. I don't know what I was going to talk about. Probably the wallpapers that I had picked out. I went with the stone at the base is from Enchanted by Nature. Uh, that one I don't really use often, but I liked the texture of it, and like pairing that with it is from Get Famous, I think. The like weathered shingles above that. And then I used some from like Snowy Escape as accent pieces. And I think like the mossy stone that I used in another section is from the Royalty and Legacy expansion pack. I was going with, I feel like a light color, and then I switched it to a darker swatch. I can't really remember. It was one way or the other. You probably would have seen it while I was just talking and stuff, but I really like how the stairs came out in this build. It feels very natural, like it's really like built into the bottom structure of the build, which is really nice. And for like the landscape and stuff, I knew that I wasn't going to raise up any terrain for this because it is a pretty small lot, and I was gonna maybe put in some like ponds and stuff, but this lot is right next to a really beautiful pond. This is like one of my favorite lots in the game. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to add any water features to this lot. I'm just going to do some landscaping. And so I have like that little circular area where I was like, okay, I need an area that leads to what I thought was originally was going to be like a horse stable. Then I changed my mind. So I needed something to lead back there. So I had that. And then after, you'll see that I just do like a winding path around the place that I'm just going to fill with a bunch of flowers and stuff. Very similar to last week's video, but I added in some different flowers that I didn't use that week. So when I get to that part, I'll probably point some of that out. I was trying to add some like visual interest to the build in different ways than I usually do. Like I was trying to use these windows that stick out a bit more just to like, I don't know, expand the build out a little bit more in some of the areas, or at least like make it seem like it is expanded out in these parts of the build. And I end up doing a similar thing with the like fireplaces and stuff, which I haven't ever actually really done, was just throw fireplaces outside as like creating a structure to the build itself, until I was like, I feel like this fireplace will look good somewhere outside. And I threw it on the back and I was like, wow, I really wish that this was visible like from the front of the build. And so I was playing around with that a little bit, and that didn't really fit in the places that I originally wanted to. And then I was like, oh, I could put this wood burning stove out here because it adds a little bit of like metallic element to it that also is in the chimneys on the roof pieces. And then I was like, oh, I could fit a fireplace on the side, but that one was way too modern, so I picked out something else. And I really like the way that that kind of just added a little bit more detail to the build without me adding in some walls and like doing it that way. And I was thinking about Howl's Moving Castle while I was building this and trying to add in some interesting elements that hang off of the build itself. And I really like the idea of using fireplaces in that way, and they don't really get in the way at all. And it just like makes the outside a bit more functional too, because I didn't really put anything on some of these areas. Well, I didn't put anything on the front porch. The like other areas, I do add a couple of items. Like the back porch ends up being like an area to take a bath because I was struggling to figure out where a shower and bathtub would fit, and that was like my way of fixing that. And then you'll see there was a big jump with a bunch of landscaping items that I had picked out to decorate the lot with. I found some flowers that I thought would look nice together, some different rocks, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to arrange these in random places that make sense for my build. And like last week's video, I did like a pink theme for the landscape. I used these sorts of hydrangeas in that build too, but I'm using them in blue this time. I also am using just like the base game flowers that I use a lot, as well as the Romantic Garden Stuff Pack flowers, because I really like the way those flowers add height into a landscape very easily. And then I use the same Enchanted by Nature bushes because I really liked how they looked with the other items I picked out. Some of the different things that I added into this landscape are some more of these base game yellow flower bushes because I wanted more yellow in the landscape, and those really like brought that out, and it just worked really well with the other flowers that I had. Was there anything else that I used? I mean, all the yellow bushes are different from last week's. I used a couple different bush pieces, like those hedges I throw in the back there. There's also one of the bushes that your Sims can pee in that I put in because I thought that it would look nice in the landscape and it added a little bit more height as well. I was trying to make this little lavender work too. I did end up finding a spot for it, but I thought I would use it in a lot more areas than I actually ended up using it in. One item I haven't really used much, like at all, is the snowy escape rocks that I have making that little rock garden in the front with the moss on it. I feel like I never reach for those ones. I think it's because there's not as many like variation in the shape for what I want, even though I love the moss on them. And so I used them in this one and I just rotated them around a little bit. I sized down and rotated one of the like taller stacked rocks with that too, just to like blend it in and create a bit of variety in it. Because normally I use the base game ones because there's like four different ones and they have like different like rock shapes and sizes for that. But I really liked the way the mossy ones looked, especially with the base of the build having the moss on those rocks. I think the upstairs level also has some moss on the stones. So it just made sense to do that for this build. I think it turned out really nice, and just rotating it around helped it to not look just like completely repetitive with that. And so me landscaping this is me pretty much just trying to use the same handful of items that I pick out, but without making it seem super repetitive in places. And so I try and use a variety of like more of the like flower bushes over here, like more of the like tall flowers, romantic garden stuff over there, just to create a variety in the landscape. And I really like how it turned out. I feel like I don't really often use like a lot of flowers to line like an entire landscape for my builds. Especially with like bigger lots, I tend to use a lot more trees and different like terrain heights and stuff to fill up the space. And so it's been nice using flowers like this in more of my landscapes in the last 2 weeks, and it definitely feels easier to do. I think the approach of like taking out what flowers you want to use and then just eye dropping them around and trying out just like different floral arrangements in different areas so it's not all like the same flowers lining one area. I think that was really helpful. And you'll see that I picked out some other decorative pieces for the outside. I threw them in the downstairs area, and I really liked that fountain. It was also another like metallic element that I wanted to add into the landscape. And so I wanted to make sure that it was like in the front of the build. I didn't really leave a good amount of space for it, but I managed to squeeze it in over there. I just had to move a little bit of the plants to make it work. And I really liked this Enchanted by Nature fountain too. I feel like it added a bit of like whimsy to the landscape. And I was like, this is a witch's cottage, so I definitely want it to feel whimsical and magical. And so I felt like that really helped. I think that was like a reward, a pre-order, not a pre-order reward. It's like the early buying rewards. I think that's what that fountain was from. I haven't even actually used that fountain in any of my builds until this one. But I only used it in that one spot, and I imagined that I was going to use it in way more areas, but it felt good just having one as like a little statement piece off to the side. And the landscapes for my builds have been sort of my favorite part of building again for me. I think it's what I spend the most time on the outside doing, and it's just what I enjoy doing the most, at least recently. I can't really speak for like months ago or a year ago because I don't really remember. But me back to building after a building slump, I've really been enjoying landscaping and the flowers, even though I am using sort of the same flowers in the last two builds that I did. It's been really nice mixing it in with some different landscape items and just getting a feel for what I like with building again. And I really loved this archway on the outside here. I was hoping it would be functional, and it is. Your Sims can walk under it just fine. There's like no issue with the doorways or anything. So I was happy about that. That was another thing I wish that I could have had in the front of my build was like the archway somewhere, but I didn't really have enough space, but it's okay because I really love the back of the build. I love the front of the build, and sometimes you either love one side of the build and then you don't really like the rest because you're like, I'm not gonna really look at it, but I actually really like those two sides of the build. And maybe the other two sides as well. I don't know. I haven't actually really looked from that area when I was building too much. But now I'm adding some of these candles around the place. I really liked these ones that were kind of like in a little flower holder. I thought it was really pretty. and matched the theme I was going for. And so I placed those around. I didn't actually really check if it lights up the place nicely at night, but I did put a bunch of them, so it should create some decent light around the place when it is nighttime. And I'm just adding some dirt around in the landscape in some areas. I didn't want too much. I didn't want it to like be like really dark under the flowers, so I only put just a little bit underneath the flowers. And then in like where the rock garden is, I made that a bit darker over there because it made sense to me to have that be like way more dirt because it's like an intentional planting box, I guess. And I knew from the start that I would have a lot of wall ivy, especially on the base of the build, with the flower ivy from Get Together in the yellow swatch because I was using some yellow flowers and I wanted it to feel like it was very natural and seamless growing from the ground up to the build. So you have all of the yellow flowers at the base of the build and then it like climbs up the walls. That was kind of my thought process while I was doing this build. And when I look at it, it definitely looks like that. I feel like those base game flowers blend in really nicely with those ivy pieces, even though they're not from like the same pack. It looks really nice. I think I'm going to be finishing up the landscape shortly. I'm just adding some more ivy to the top areas of the build, looking for some other pieces to add to the walls itself. I thought I would use that yellow flower box. I didn't actually really like it. I felt like it stuck out too much. And I really like how interesting the Enchanted by Nature windows look in this build. I didn't really want to cover them up much, but I did put in a different flower box on the upper level that I thought looked a bit better. And I liked this ivy piece with the flowers, but I couldn't find a flower swatch that I thought looked really nice and blended in with what I already had. So I just went with green ivy hanging down just to add a little bit more like variation in the green that I was using and adding some more stuff to the roof. Sorry, I when I have my tab cameras locked in, when I try to raise things up, sometimes my camera goes to where I had it last saved. But I wanted just some stuff on the roof. Like I had a chicken fountain on one of the roof areas that I thought looked really nice. And I was like, wow, I could probably put a whole bunch of like metallic stuff on the roof pieces, but then I was like, I think that might take away from all of the chimneys that I have. So I was like, I don't actually have to do that. One is enough, and then just like one of those little like weather turner things on the roof. I don't know what it's actually for, but it like blows in the wind, right? So I have that at the top of the build. And then I added in some Enchanted by Nature yellow flowers around because I was like, oh, this will add a bit more character to the landscape. And it did. I added in some areas that I thought could use a little bit more color, and I think it turned out really good. And now we are on the inside of the build, and I do fully furnish this one. When I was getting back into building after my break, I found interiors to be very difficult, but this one didn't take me that long at all. And yeah, so I mean, it's not a lot of space. It seems like a lot of space, but each of these rooms are very small, too small for me to fit in staircases. So I have the high school years ladders, pretty much, yeah, in every single level because when you snap it on the wall, ivy is on it. And I was like, yeah, of course I'm gonna choose the option that has the ivy. And I do add a little bit of ivy and flowers on the top level too. So it's like the greenery is growing in a little bit. And I needed to use this bed from Royalty and Legacy. I love this bed. I didn't know where I wanted it, and I was like, wow, this is the perfect spot for it. I don't know why that wasn't my first option, was to put it right in front of the stained glass bay window where it like feels like it is one piece now. I really like how that turned out. And I used pretty much the same wood throughout the entire build, which is usually my default. I always put in like the same wood paneling, and I'm like, I'll change this when I get to it, and then I never change it. But I knew that from the start. I was like, I'm going to add wood paneling in, and that's just going to be the entire build. And I used a slightly darker weathered wood than the floors. Like this one is from Horse Ranch, I'm pretty sure, and I use like the horizontal ones down here, a slight variation in some of the other rooms. I think I used like the vertical wood planks for those ones. But yeah, down here I felt like this spot for the kitchen was perfect by this other stained glass window. It fits everything in here without it being like too squished together. And then I would figure out the rest of the like floor plan after because I didn't know where the living room and dining room was going to go or the bathroom. Like this stage of the build was me deciding where things were going to fit because the build is pretty small and that made me nervous. And so you'd see, and I started with where I wanted the bedroom to be, and I was like, perfect. The bedroom is going to take up this entire room of the like third floor tower, and then I knew that the cauldron was going to be on the top level because that made the most sense to me, and that I needed this to be the like main living space. And I really liked this bench from Horse Ranch, and it felt kind of like it could be part of the kitchen table. And then so it made sense to add it right off of the kitchen. So I was like, okay, that's a great place for that. I'll have to find a place for a living room, which ends up just being a table with a TV on it and a little chair. Because I was like, they could be sitting at that kitchen table and watching TV too. And I didn't check if it was functional. I think that was one thing that I wanted to check was if your sim can sit on the bench. I did try and leave half of a tile like away from the table, but I have a feeling it's not functional. I might need to like move it over a tiny bit. And I made the tiniest bathroom off to the side where it's just a toilet and a sink. And that's when I was like, oh, I can't really fit in a shower over there. And so I was like, oh, I can just put a bathtub outside. It seems very private out there anyway. And I feel like that's really nice and cozy, especially with the fireplace right next to it. And it overlooks that pond. And there's like the big tree right there. Feels like a nice place to take a bath anyway. And then I put a shower downstairs because I was like, showers are more convenient for gameplay because it feels quicker. I think it is quicker for your Sims to just take a shower than take a bath. So I was like, oh, I could put an outdoor shower down there. And that's when my idea for it to be like a workspace down there was starting to form. And the stable idea was already like thrown out the window because I didn't really leave any space where a horse can go outside at all because of just like all of the landscape I had already done. And so I was like, all right, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with that instead. And then up here, I wanted the cauldron on a raised platform because I think it looks nicer. And I forgot how to adjust a roof, and that just shows my break that I took. That I just don't know how to do these little things. That used to be muscle memory for me. And so it took me a long time to figure out why the roof wasn't adjusting the way I wanted it to. And it was like the roof trim was showing through the wall. And so I just put ivy over there because I was like, it's fine. I'm just going to throw ivy. Now you don't see it at all. And it looks good. And then I add some of the like yellow flower ivy over there too. I don't add a whole lot of decorations to the walls in this build because I really didn't feel like it. And so the fact that it's just like a bunch of ivy and flowers up in the magic room, it made it easier for it to feel a little bit more decorated. And I really like that barrel with the bunny. I had to add it outside, so I threw it over there. And the sign kind of makes sense because I do turn it into a little bar, so it's kind of like their own business where they brew the potions up here and then they have their potion bar downstairs off the side of their house where people walk through their really pretty garden to get to it. I mean, that would be a great place to visit, I think. And now I am back to furnishing the house, adding in more details after I set up where I wanted certain things to go. And I want to start up here because it's kind of the most fun is doing the magic room. And so I was like, all right, this will like get my momentum going. And I was using some of these, I think these are the event reward items that I have on the wall from like the latest reward event, and they're really cute. And so I'm glad that I have them. I wasn't really logging in that much recently because I really wasn't playing as much as I used to, and I was really nervous that I wasn't going to get all of the items, but luckily they give like extra time, so it's like, okay, perfect. I didn't miss out on anything. I would have been sad if I missed those because they're very cute. And I love this wind chime item. I've never used it. I think it's from one of the new kits that was gifted to me by The Sims, and I haven't really used any of the items from it. But I had like stumbled on that one. I was like, this is perfect for this room. And I was gonna go overboard and put a bunch of them over that window, but I kept it at one so that it wasn't just like too much going on. And then I just put some herbs on the wall, like the Enchanted by Nature wall decorations over there. Some different boxes, well, one box and a table, so I could add some clutter next to the cauldron. I did playtest this part, so I do know that your Sims are able to use the cauldron just fine. I think I'm starting to learn where I can like place things and get away with it. Because I remember when I was doing a different build that I had a cauldron raised up on a platform. I think that it was like the chandelier above it was making it not functional. So I was like making sure that that wasn't anywhere near that. But yeah, the room works perfectly fine. There's just the cauldron up here. There's a stereo for your Sims to listen to. But outside of that, most of the stuff is just decor items, and there's not really much else to do up here. I almost forgot to add a bookcase into this build, and then that was like one of the last items I added to the living room. But a bookcase would have made sense up here. I just didn't really have the space for it up here, and I was trying to find some clutter, and I knew what clutter I wanted to use. I wanted to use some of the new stuff from Royalty and Legacy, specifically that book with the candle and the globe. That's one of my favorite items that has been added to the game recently. And I was like, okay, that's the exact item I want to add over here. And yeah, this room is pretty much done. I didn't go overboard with it. I was like, oh, maybe I should really clutter this build, but I didn't want to push myself too hard because I'm like, I'm enjoying this. Let's not go overboard and then make me frustrated, especially with like the editing process of how long this would take me to do. So this was like the perfect amount, I think. I feel like it looks lived in. There's a lot going on, but it's not too much going on. And I think it's like I saved myself some time by not really decorating the walls of the build too much because that would have been very time consuming. And now we're onto the bedroom, which is like, I really love this bedroom. I really love every part of this build, though, which I'm happy about. It definitely feels good to be back to building and building something that I really love and was like very easy for me to build without like struggling that much as like I was before I took my break. I loved working on the interior for this. I'm not sure if my next build will be fully furnished or not. It kind of has to just be based like week to week on how I'm feeling. I don't know if I have it in me to do an interior every single week like I used to. I think that's what would get the most repetitive for me. Because like looking at this bedroom is very much like my favorite items are in here with a couple of items that I don't really use much like that. The side table that I have the candles on, I never really use that because I think it's because of the shades of the wood grain. They like stand out so much. But I think I liked that look for this room specifically because the walls kind of have like a similar thing going on, not as like extreme, it's a little bit more subtle. And I really wanted to use this easel. I don't even know where this easel is from. Is this from the new expansion pack? I managed to just throw it outside because it didn't fit in the bedroom or like in the cauldron room, which is fine because now it gave purpose to that one little porch out there or balcony out there. And then I added in like some stone walls. I believe I only really put it in the like bedroom because it just looked good over there. It didn't really look good anywhere else. It was very like it stood out way too much with the wood walls, so I put this beaded curtain over it instead of putting a column, which I was going to do, but I felt like that would just take up way too much space in this already very tiny room, and the curtain was like the perfect alternative to doing that. And then just a little bit of clutter, a tarot deck, an open book, and a tiny oil lamp next to the bed. I moved the candles on top of the dresser so that I could add some clutter there. And I fit in another table. This is from Jungle Adventure. I really love that table. And I just putting some clutter on here. I guess I did like a little bit of jewelry over here because it is a bedroom. So it's like I feel like I should just add something that would make sense for a sim getting ready. And so I made that table like sort of a makeshift vanity area over there. Like there's a metal tin that could hold some like cosmetics or something in it, even though that's like I feel like every time I see that, I'm like, yeah, that's for the kitchen. I think it works in other areas of the house too. And then I'm back downstairs to the main living area because I was just getting like a floor plan out for every room, and then I would come back and work out the rest of the details, the rest of the clutter, which I think was helpful. So I didn't have to like stick to one room for a very long time. I had an idea of what the house is going to look like, and then I can add just the right amount of clutter that I want into the build because like this could be done technically. I don't have to add anything else to it if I really didn't want to. Like it has all the furniture, it has some rugs, and now everything else is just like finishing touches. I mean, I did need to add some more lights and it was pretty dark, so that was something that was a bit important. I was mostly going with candlelight for this build because that's just what made the most sense for my theme to me was having candles. So I have some lanterns on the walls. I have like the chandeliers and just like other candles on all their surfaces where I needed a bit more light. Like in the kitchen towards the back, I have a candle back there that really helped. And I really liked having two mugs that were kind of dirty on the table to make it look lived in. And those are just some of my favorite clutter pieces in the entire game. Anyway, I remembered a garbage can on the inside, but I don't think I have one on the outside. I might remember to put that in, or I might not. I don't know. But I've been like, I feel like I've been good about putting a garbage can outside, and then I wasn't with this one. I did want to make sure that a sim could sit on that bench, so I'm pretty sure that I'll remember to put a garbage can outside if I need to, and I didn't actually put one in there. I was also really loving using like the produce and stuff from it's like Garden to Table, I think was the kit name. I really love that kit, and so I was putting that in there. It just like it makes it feel more like you're living off of the land a bit more, which I really like for sort of like a backstory for my builds. I like just like the candlelight, not a lot of technology in the builds, and then I guess like I always have a place for gardening in my builds, and so those are always like a really nice touch, and it's easy to like sort by some of these packs that I really love and making cluttering just a little bit more easy. And I was like, oh yeah, let me put this tarot poster up. I wanted like the backs of the cards and then one in the middle. And I was going through, I was like, which one am I going to pick today? I always feel like I pick strength. And I think there was something else I always pick, but I went with the magician for this one. And I was like, yeah, that's the one I will pick today. So I don't end up picking the same tarot card that I always pick for my builds. I'm pretty sure the Empress is the other poster I always use. And like I always use my favorite tarot cards in like the deck. So the Magician is also another one of my favorites. So it makes sense that I used it. All the art that was like designed for life and death with like the tarot cards was so beautiful. And I wish that we got a full tarot deck with it. That would have been really cool. And so now down here is the last room of the build. And at this point, I still don't know what this room is going to be. But I was like, I just need to start splitting this up a little bit to tackle it because I have no idea. And like a larger square room was too difficult for me to decide. So I was like, let me make a little bathroom and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of the space that's remaining. It also made me add a little window to the front of the build where the bathroom is, so it wasn't just like no window in there. And normally when I add a window that I don't intend to put there, I always kind of hide it behind ivy so it doesn't really change much of the outside, but it adds a little bit of light on the inside. And for the rest of these rooms, I really don't remember what was going through my mind or if I had something decided on yet, but I split it up into 2 more rooms, and really the main entrance room is just the flower arranging area. And maybe I did have an idea of having the bar over here because I instantly went to the bar decorations and I pulled out that sort of like nectar cabinet, which is from like Adventure Awaits, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, I really want to use this down here. And then it kept getting in my way. And then I couldn't find a good layout because of it. And I was like, no, this was like the first item I pulled out and I was so excited about it. I need to keep it and use it. And so it's a little bit squished in here, but this was the first room that I play tested to make sure everything worked over here because I was worried about it and I didn't want to delete that little like nectar shelf. I just like slid some things around and I was like, all right, I think there's enough space for the bar. It is. I play tested it. The bar works just fine. I was like, this feels so cramped in this corner, but I slightly adjusted things. It is still a bit cramped, but I think that it looked better than how it was just before. And I just needed to have that in there. And then I pick out some more like wall stuff to hang around and fill in the space quickly without putting much else, like more thought into it. And I found that cute bar cart that I was like, wow, that's like the perfect thing to add into here. And I was mostly looking for some sort of shelf that I can put on that like wall to the left. And I don't even remember if I find anything that goes exactly there. Maybe that goes back over there. Okay, yeah, so that's there. And then I pick out these mushrooms. I was like, I should have added these all around to add like to like the magical natural theme of the build. And I do change them out to purple to match the chairs that I had picked for the bar area. And I was like, wow, now I feel like it's all tied together like perfectly. And now we're at the screenshots for the build, and I am showing each floor plan for each of the floors of the build as I did in my last video too, so you could kind of see where we are in the build itself. This is the second floor, and then after these we go up to the third floor, which is the bedroom here. And I really like how these pictures came out, and then the cauldron room all the way at the top where the chimney smoke was going into that room, which makes sense for that room, but if it was any other room it would be a bit odd, but it worked out that it was like a magical room up there anyway. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all soon. Bye.